Welcome back to Hinces in the House. As you know by now, I hope that we are the Hinces and this is our house.
Nothing has changed. It's
Last
been
week.
this way for a month and a half now. Nothing has changed.
So today we are bringing up the discussion of first jobs. Ethan, tell me about your first job. That could be any timeline. It could be a job you had in
So technically,
middle school, a job you had in high school, adulthood, wherever. First job.
my first job was the child labor that my father, got when I was born.
Yes.
That was technically my first job.
As most men have.
Right. Free. Free. I was working for free.
Right.
Child
labor.
I guess, he was paying for food and water and clothing.
Right.
And
He wasn't paying you in money, just in resources.
And a place to live and eat food. So, my legitimate first job, was with Len, who was a mentor for me at church. Him and his wife Natalie oversaw the sound booth, and he was like a direct mentor to me. And so in high school, I want to say, was when the job started. He owned an air conditioning company in South Florida. And so he hired me, let me work with him on his jobs, which I was basically just a glorified lunch buddy. The biggest question of the day was usually, where are we going to eat today, Ethan? And what do you want? What are we going to do? Like, are we going to go to Pollo, or are we going to go to
Pollo. Rip.
Publix, or
all these places in Florida that don't exist up here in
yeah,
the Great White North.
we got a lot of pub subs.
Yeah.
That was a pretty big staple in our working environment. But yeah, so he did AC. So he did AC for the church Calvary. That was like one of his contracts he had. So that entailed like, not only it entailed Calvary, but it also entailed like a ton of other like Calvary property and like Calvary satellites and like Calvary House. Like we serviced those apartments and that kind of stuff. And then he obviously had like other contracts with, local homeowners where we would go around and then this was like a service month to month, job. Like, so for Calvary, we would go around and we would replace all of the filters like once or twice a month, and we would like take a little shop vac and like suck out the drain lines to get any like slime that had built up, and
Yum.
Yeah, just like that kind of stuff. And like, yeah, we had like the filters, obviously Calvary, like big old church. Right. So we had huge AC. So it was like, these huge AC units, and we had this big pink roll of AC filter that you would roll out and then cut it to size and then just stuff it in.
Weird.
Yeah, it didn't have like a frame to it.
Right. So that was your first.
But yeah, and there was a lot of stuff that he didn't want me to do at first. He kind of got more comfortable with me doing it as I worked with him for a couple of years. But like, any electrical work, he was very much like, I will do the electrical work. I mean, I had obviously never gone to school for this. Like, he had gone to school for AC
kid
and
on
I
his
believe,
conscience.
Right, and part of going, I don't think that the voltages we were working with could have like killed you instantly. Like, it would have hurt you, but I don't think it was like you're dead. There were probably some of the bigger units that we worked with that maybe would have killed you, but like a home unit, if it was just like a little, putting a wire screw, is that what they're called? Wire nut, something like that.
Someone with more experience probably knows more than us.
I didn't do a lot of electrical work, so I don't know much about it. Black wire, that kill you, black and red wire.
That kill, good.
So he did a lot of that, and so like I said, I was just kind of like there for jokes.
Hanging out.
Yeah, laughing. There was one
there
time.
The
There was one time we were replacing a compressor at the Boca campus, I want to say. Or was it Plantation? No, it was definitely not
For those
Plantation.
of you that don't know, Calvary Chapel Fort Lauderdale is a megachurch that Ethan was born and raised at, and
We've talked about Calvary before.
kind of, sort of. They have, like, at least at the time that we left, they had 11 satellite campuses in various locations around Florida. So
Yeah.
when we say things like Boca and Plantation and those sorts of places, they are other cities in Florida.
Right. So we were replacing a compressor, which for anyone who doesn't know anything about AC units, which I would assume is probably a lot of people, compressor, it obviously compresses the air and it's for doing that, but they're very, very heavy, like very, very heavy. So we were on the roof of the building because that's where all the AC units were at this place, and we had to get this compressor off the roof, and we tied a rope around it, and we were gonna like lower it down because it was just gonna be like awkward and big to try and like carry down a ladder. So we were gonna like just lower it down. So tied a rope around it. I like go and like kind of like lower it off the edge. It kind of like drops a little bit as it like makes it off. And so Len was holding the rope, and it just went like zzz, and he was like zzz, like right through his hands. I mean, there was like smoke, not actual smoke, but I mean like
Cartoon like smoke.
Yeah, and then it just kind of like fell to the ground, and it was like, oh, good thing no one was underneath us because that would have
what a disaster that was.
Straight up murdered somebody if that had happened.
Yeah.
But luckily that didn't happen. It fell to the ground with a loud crash.
What about the state of Len's hands?
Yeah, he was not wearing gloves, so it was
Yeah.
just, and the rope was a little bit too thin. I think we needed like a rope that was,
Thick boy.
Yeah, a thick rope that you could hold on to. He had a pretty thin rope at the time that we were using, and so there wasn't a whole lot of grip.
Oh.
So it just like zip right
Hurts
down.
my hands to think about.
Yeah, apparently I guess there was another time where they had a compressor on the roof, him and Zerschmied, because he also worked with Zerschmied before he worked with me, and him and Zerschmied were, I think, also on the Boca roof, and they were replacing a compressor, and they just were over like a grassy area, so they were like, let's just throw it off. And so they threw it off the edge, and I guess it'd like been kind of wet from like a rainstorm, and it just went like and like into the ground.
Oh!
Never saw it again.
Just disappeared like it went into a sinkhole. That's crazy.
Basically. So that was my first job. That was a really fun job, even though I didn't really, it was like almost a fake job, if you will, like I would say. Like it was just,
I mean,
it was
you were
kind of
still
hanging out
doing
with Len.
active work.
It was kind of learning a trade.
Yep.
I considered going to like AC school at one point, just because it was something that I was doing. So I was like, I could maybe like transition into doing this.
It would have been pretty lucrative in South Florida had we stayed there.
Most likely, yeah.
Not so much in South Dakota.
Right. But yeah, it was also just hanging out with Len and having a good time with Len. And so I appreciate that. I had a really good time working with him for a long time.
Both and.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that,
he did buy me a truck that I could start, because I could, he got a second truck, like a work truck that he like gave to me that I could use for jobs. And man, this truck was a piece of crap.
Oh man.
I mean, I don't know what it was. I'm not a car person, so I don't know car.
Sure.
But it would take a long time to start, like the starter for, I don't know if it was a starter or the ignition or what it was, but it wouldn't start properly. You had to like give it a ton of gas and then like finagle it, and then it would start. And it also had a problem where randomly you would like push the gas and it would just be like and like not go, and then it would suddenly be like and like go.
Oh man.
So it was a pretty terrible truck. It was not. I mean, I made it work. Just there were times where I would be like, my truck is not starting. And then like 5-10 minutes later it would start, and I'd be like, okay, here we go. Let's go.
So that was that job.
Yeah.
Where
Then
did you go from there?
after that, I got a job at Starbucks in a Macy's. First off, Macy's, if you're watching this, I hate you.
Okay. Simmer.
And I never have stepped foot in a Macy's to shop. I've maybe walked through them in a mall.
I will say, like, can confirm. Like, Ethan, we go to the mall. We will never park at a Macy's entrance. We will never go. Like, if Macy's is having a sale.
Macy's was a terrible employer.
Right.
Terrible,
so this is like,
employer.
it was a licensed Starbucks. It was a Starbucks within Macy's.
It wasn't Starbucks.
Right.
From what I've heard, Starbucks is a great employer. I mean, there are obviously stories of people that have had terrible experiences at Starbucks, but from what I've heard, Starbucks offers pretty good pay, pretty good benefits to full and part-time employees. Like, yeah, there's a lot of nonsense you deal with being a Starbucks employee, but overall, I've heard Starbucks is a pretty good place to work. Maybe other Macy's are different, but my experience with this Macy's was just terrible. I liked the people I worked with. Like, I didn't have any issue with my coworkers, and
Right.
you met a lot of people that worked at the mall, because like a lot of people that worked in like PacSun or Forever 21 or wherever, they would come to Starbucks in the morning and like get a drink, or throughout the day. So you would like learn to like
Yeah.
learn the other mall employees, and you'd kind of like develop a pseudo friendship, more so just like, oh yeah, you're getting a double shot espresso with half a pump of syrup. Like, there were also certain people who would come enough, and they would like request a specific person to make them a drink. Like, I had a couple of people that would come and they'd be like, oh, have him make the drink for me, because the way I like the way he makes it versus the way you make it, because there's a little bit of slight variation.
Right.
Obviously, like when I was making drinks, my drinks probably were all very, very similar, but like all my cappuccinos might have been a little bit different than like
All of someone else's cappuccinos.
right, exactly. So there were certain people. There was this one guy, this really nice old guy. He came in like almost every day, and he would always want like a double shot espresso, just the espresso, and I think he wanted like a little bit of like foam on top, like a little dollop of foam on top. But he didn't want a lid on his drink. So he wanted just the espresso cup, but he didn't want a lid. And it was against policy to hand out drinks without a lid. So he'd be like, just give it to me. I'm like, I can't, like, I got to put a lid on. And he'd like take the lid off and like throw it away immediately. And I'm like, look, man, like, it's not me. Like,
right.
I would give you the drink. Whatever. But like, if I handed that out and then he spilled it on himself and then decided to sue Starbucks, they'd like come after me. So I don't think that he would have done that, but it was just like it was a thing. Like, my manager was there one day and he's like, you have to put a lid on that drink, Ethan. I was like, okay, I'll put a lid on it, but he always tells me no lid, and then he goes and like downs it and then throws the cup away too. Like, he knows what he wants, he gets it. Like,
might as well just give it to him in like a glass cup and then just shoot it back and send it on its way.
Basically. So I enjoyed working in the coffee shop
Sure.
atmosphere.
I feel like you and I could have a whole separate podcast about coffee shop experiences.
But like I said, it was only Macy's was the problem. Macy's just was a terrible
Cannot stress that enough.
employer. Like, for example, at our the food that like we would throw out at the end of we would like dump out tons of coffee, like, because we had to change out our coffee like every half an hour. So you'd have like basically a full pot, especially in the middle of the day. You go just ching 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 ching, like dollar signs like flying down the drains, and we had food that had little dates, and if you didn't, so that would get thrown out at the end of the night. So this one girl, she would take it in a bag and like give it to like a homeless guy who like was around. And long story short, at the end of my employment with Starbucks, a ton of people got fired for stealing because they were like taking this food and like giving it away to people. And so like the sweetest girl that I worked with, like such a nice person, just like super kind. She got fired because she was called a thief by Macy's. It wasn't Starbucks, it was Macy's. And like just like a ton of people got fired, and it was like really bad. And so that was the point where I was like, this is not an environment I want to continue working in. So I put in my 2 weeks and quit at that point.
I think at the time too, you were transitioning into your job at Calvary.
Yeah, I was working part-time at Calvary at the time too. And Calvary was offering me more hours, like full-time employment essentially. But I really liked my manager, Nathan, I believe his name was.
Wasn't it Nick?
Was it Nick? It might have been Nicholas.
I think it was Nick.
It was either Nicholas or Nathan, and it was Nick or Nate. I can't remember. But he was a nice guy, kind of aloof at times.
Tell that one story that was so funny.
There was one time where he comes into work and he was, just doing whatever in the behind the counter, just doing drinks or whatever. And I think he was actually putting caulking down along one of our seams, and he had his t-shirt tucked into his pants, but he had tucked his t-shirt into his underwear. So he's like bending over and his pants like would ride down a little bit, which would be fine because his shirt was tucked in, but it was tucked into his underwear. So it was like Hanes underwear is like like this much showing out, and he's bending over and I'm like, "Hey, Nick, your shirt," because everyone's just kind of like laughing about it. I'm like, "Tell this poor guy, like he looks like an idiot right now." So I'm like, "Nick, your shirt is tucked into your underwear." And he's like, "Oh, sorry about that, Ethan." And so he
goes to adjust it.
He like untucks and like, or he like goes to adjust it or something, but he doesn't really fix the problem. And I'm just like, okay, like I told him, but he's not really fixing the problem. And then a second later, he like makes some like plumber's crack joke. Like I think he thought that like his butt was showing essentially. And I was like, I literally went, "No, Nick, your shirt is tucked into your underwear and your underwear is like riding up, like your beefy Hanes are just hanging in the breeze right now. Like everyone in line is seeing your underwear as you're bending over." So he was a character. I didn't see him all that much because he managed.
Didn't you say that he was like, "Oh yeah, it happens"?
Yeah, something. He was like real nonchalant. And he's like, "Oh, that happens," and like then he fixed it, like after that. But like it was
that doesn't just happen. You intentionally tuck your.
I don't think he Yeah. I mean, he was tucking his. I'm sure he just thought he was tucking it into his pants, between his underwear and his pants, and he just went into the underwear.
Funny.
Yeah, but
What a guy.
There was some other stuff. Like I found a dead lizard one time in the ice maker, and so I called the man. I don't know if it was Nick or just a supervisor at the time. And I was like, opened up, like, "There's a dead lizard in here." It was like a little baby lizard, like that big, but he had clearly died long before and somehow made it in there because he was like kind of decomposed. And I was like, "This is nasty. Like, we gotta
change out all the ice." Yeah.
Right. I was like, "We gotta do something." And the person was like, "We'll just like scoop out so he just scooped out like a big section of it, which presumably it was probably okay. But in my mind, I was like, we gotta like take every like clean get all the ice out, wipe the whole thing down, like
then just scooped a section.
And they just scooped out a big section. I was like, good to go. I was like, okay, I will not be getting ice drinks here anymore.
Yeah, that changes that.
So that was kind of like a weird experience. But like I said, overall, if you're gonna take anything away from this story, screw you, Macy's. I hate you, and I never will set foot in your store again.
And that's on that.
Yes. Then I got hired by the FAA. Then I got hired by Calvary. Which can be a...
We can have a whole different podcast about our time at Calvary. Anyways. That was a time.
Yeah.
And then you got hired by the FAA.
And that's my current job.
And that's why we are up here. And there's that. My first job, so also child labor. I'm an only child, so my mom would just like make me do stuff. But she also paid me for it. So, I mean, I guess that's kind of a job. It would be like, "Hey, go wash my car. I'll give you $20. Great. She'd be like,
See, we got to wash the car because it was fun to wash the car.
No.
Like soap and buckets and water and sponge fights and spraying. Yeah, that's true. We had like
motivation.
It was like all of us boys and
right.
I don't know, Savannah and Gus maybe too.
So it would be that. It would be like, "Hey, you want to weed with me in the garden? I'll give you $20. I'd be like, "Great." Like everything was $20. I got a weekly like allowance for doing normal things like keeping my room relatively clean and taking out the trash, like those kinds of stuff. And then on top of that, my mom would like just give me random jobs that gave me $20, which was great. But I wouldn't consider that any sort of building work ethic. Like I knew how to take out the trash. Like I didn't, I knew how to weed a garden. I didn't know how to like do practical life things. And then when I moved to Florida, so I went on my 16th birthday. I went around the mall and put in applications like everywhere. I think it was actually 15 because that was in North Carolina when you could get a job. So I tried, and I literally just like could not get a job. It wasn't happening. I would like give them the application. I would call back and follow up, and like it just nobody wanted to hire me. And then I ended up then going, when I moved to Florida, then I was in school full time, and I was like, I can't do a job right now. And my mom was like, "That's fine. Like, I'll pay for your school while you're in school, focus on your studies," that kind of thing. And it wasn't until my second year of Ocean's Edge when I was in a weird like apartment situation where the apartment was more money, then my mom could only pay one, either my living expenses or my rent. And so then I had to get a job for that reason. And so my first job was, I was 17, and it was this place called Houston's.
Only been inside one time.
You went there?
I've been inside one time. I maybe ate there. I don't remember.
Huh. We were not together when I was working there. So.
No, it was with, if I went, it was with like Gus and Amanda
Sure.
and Natalie and Len and Travis.
It's a very like swanky place.
Right.
I technically wasn't even supposed to get an interview. So their interview process at the time was like you go in, you apply in person. They have like open interviews, if you will, from 2 to 4, like Monday through Thursday or something like that. And so you were supposed to go in, apply, and then if they deemed you worthy, like then you would have an interview right there on the spot. And I had on like a nice like sweater tank. Like I looked professional. I had like a sweater tank and a pair of shorts, but like both of those were apparently a no-go. Later, I found out after they gave me the interview and hired me anyway. So that was my first job. I only worked 3 days a week. It was like Sunday, Tuesday, Friday, something like that. Very good money because it was a very swanky place. It was on the Intercoastal, and but they had like a dress code for both like employees and patrons. It was crazy.
What would you describe the Intercoastal as?
It's like a second ocean. It's not. Okay, so there's the ocean, and then there's like a strip of land, and then on the other side of that land there's the Intercoastal.
It's like a street for boats.
Sure. I would put it that way.
To get to the ocean.
Yeah.
Essentially.
I'd put it that way.
And I guess a little bit of traversing. I was meeting with Brett this morning, and he asked, I said the Intercoastal, and he was like, "What's the Intercoastal?" And I was like, "It's the Intercoastal." Like, I never thought to describe it because everyone I've talked to
those
just
that don't
know what an Intercoastal is.
Live
in Florida it's just the Intercoastal. Right. Like, yeah, it's just...
So it's like not the ocean. It's like there's the ocean, and then there's land,
but
and then there's a body of water, and then there's like the
purpose,
mainland.
Other than, I would assume the purpose is people who live on the Intercoastal can have a boat, put the boat in, and it's easier to then just drive your boat to the ocean rather than take your boat on a trailer and then, you know...
Or dock it somewhere else, or, you know, that kind
Right,
of
you'd
thing.
have to dock it on the ocean.
Right.
Which would be very difficult because...
Well, you could, I mean, you still dock it. There's like marinas and bays and stuff that you would dock it. It's just, it's kind of like boarding a horse. You don't keep it in your backyard.
Right, I feel like those typically come through the Intercoastal or something like... Anyways, off topic.
That's the Intercoastal. So, it was essentially located right on a body of water. People would come in off the boat all the time. And so because of that, Houston's had this dress code of like, men could wear tank tops, but they had to have a certain width on their shoulder, and it had to be a hemmed sleeve. It couldn't be like cut off, and there was no hats allowed and no flip-flops. Like, well,
no hats?
Maybe flip-flops. No hats. No, it was like a whole thing. Like inside. Like, because we had an outdoor dining area, and so things were a little bit different out there, but for the most part. Very strict for patrons, even more strict for employees. I had to wear all black. I had to wear a blazer. I had to wear a belt and like a thing. I was very fortunate at the time that I could just put all my hair up in a ponytail, but otherwise like hair had very specific requirements. I had to wear makeup. It was very intense. And the inside of this place was dark. Like physically, like the room was very dark, and it was kept pretty chilly as well because
that intimate atmosphere.
Yeah, it ended up making a very depressing time. They played obviously the same music all the time, and it was just like boat music, and they had kind of an open kitchen wall, and so you could kind of see the people cooking and that kind of stuff. I was a hostess. We did a lot more than we got credit for, but and we didn't get tips. We got tip share, which is another thing that I thought was like kind of unfair for the servers, but also kind of not. So as far as I knew, servers kept 100% of their cash tips, and then like 80% of their credit card tips, and then 20% of that went into tip share, which then got split between servers and hostesses.
Which I feel like that's kind of a common practice.
Because serving wage in Florida at the time, at least at Houston's, was like $4.75, and hostesses were also making $4.75. So it was like you had to have tip share in order to like survive. But for 3 days a week, every week I was making like $100, which really wasn't bad, you know, comparatively, like outside of my paycheck.
Right. Especially when you're a college kid who your expenses are paid by your parents, and the extra money is just extra money. Like it's not for living.
Well, at the time it was for food. Like, it wasn't for rent. I could
Right.
not have lived that way and paid rent.
Right.
But I mean, essentially $400 a month for food was great.
Oh yeah, plenty of money for one person.
Right, exactly. Food and anything else that I wanted to do that was fun. But that job only lasted about 3 months because then I wasn't as involved in school activities because I always had to work. And so my mom was like, why am I paying for you to go to school if you can't do the things that...
Why am I paying for you to go to school?
If you ever talk to her, that is what she sounds like. Just kidding.
Debatable.
Mom, don't come after me. So yeah, she was just frustrated that she was paying for me to go to school and I wasn't allowed, like I wasn't able to be involved in like the artist shows and that kind of stuff because I was working. So quit that after 3 months. And then at the end of my second year of Ocean's Edge, my mom like literally just gave me $500 and said, good luck. And that was it. And I was like, what the heck am I supposed to do? I just went to a worship school. I can't do anything. Help. And then right after that, got hired at Calvary. It was kind of this, Ocean's Edge at the time had a policy of like, well, you can't stay in the apartments if you're not going to do anything, that kind of thing of like, you're not going to just be a freeloader here for the summer. You have to have a job. And so I kind of got a side gig doing like VBS with Calvary, which was like right at the beginning of summer. And so that enabled me to stay in the apartments. And then I was just, I mean, we were down to the wire when I got some random gig to run Pro Presenter for the K through 12 school on Calvary's campus. And then the head video engineer called me and then I got a job at Calvary and worked there for another 2 years. But in that time too, I also got a job at Express very briefly. That was a weird situation. I think I only worked there for like 2 weeks. I got the job, like they interview, all that, hired. And then
I think we were together at this point.
They were...
I feel like they weren't giving you hours.
They weren't giving me hours. They didn't have like any shifts for me. And they had this system that was like, if I was scheduled for a call-in shift. So I had to call in to see if they needed me rather than them calling to like, you know, from their perspective, it was like, it's just easier if you're scheduled for a call-in if you call. But then it was this weird, like, I can't make plans because I might be working. So it was just weird. And I think for like a week and a half, I was doing my call-in shifts and I wasn't getting any of them. And so finally I was like, dude, what the heck? Like I called them and I was like, I cannot do this anymore. And they're like, well, we didn't really like need you. I was like, why did you hire me? Like, what the heck? So I quit that job and then I got a job at, because Calvary I think it was full time, but it was just not enough at the time. Like for what I was.
Was it full time?
I think so.
Maybe it was like 30 hours, 35
Something
hours.
like that. It wasn't, oh, you know what? It was probably just video and not theater yet.
Right.
Yeah. So again, different podcast, but, I needed supplemental income. So after Express, like just right after Express is when I got the job at Big Louie's. And so I worked at this pizza place.
I loved when you worked at Big Louie's because I
hated that job.
I got free pizza.
Technically, we were
love
supposed
Big
to have.
Louie's pizza.
It's so good.
I love the Pumani Brothers pizza and
Yep.
Big Louie's pizza. If you ever go to Florida,
Permani Brothers is in Plantation.
Pumani Brothers and Big Louie's.
Which I think
great
Permani
pizza.
Brothers originated in Philly.
I don't care.
I want to say.
They're in Florida.
I'm just saying for people that are like, that's not where it's from.
Well, and they made New York style pizza, I believe, like the big slices that you could fold in half.
Bigger than my
I don't do
face.
that. They were
That's
so
because
good.
you eat pizza like a weirdo. Anyway, when you live in upstate New York for any amount of time, you live in New York for any amount of time. If you don't fold your pizza, you just forgo your right
like
to be a
just
human being.
Enjoy everything slowly.
Okay.
I don't need to shove it down my face.
Clearly,
I
you
can
never
enjoy
lived in New
my
York.
pizza.
So I worked at Big Louie's. It was this place, little like pizza place on the corner. There was a Subway next to it and a gas station. It was just like hole in the wall pizza place. And I had been there like several times when I was in OE because it was right at the corner of like our apartment and how to get to church. So I'd been there several times. I was familiar with the establishment. I loved their pizza. They would have like a 2 for $5 slices and great pizza. So I applied, got a job there. It was a miserable job. Like the perks were the pizza, obviously. And technically I got like 2 free slices a day and I was supposed to have them and eat them there, but the owners didn't super care. And so I just like took them and left. But I think from the very beginning, like they made it up in their minds that I was incompetent. And they didn't, like the owners, they didn't want to be my friend.
Right.
So it was like a guy, his name was Nick, and I think it was his dad's shop or something. Like it was like family owned. So he was like the owner and then his girlfriend. And they were, this like couple and they hired me. Like they went through the process and hired me and they were always like civil, polite even, but they weren't like nice. Like they didn't want to be friendly. There's this one girl that I worked with there, Elsa, and she was foreign of some kind, and she was a very lovely human, and we had a good time as friends in general.
I would have made some joke, but I don't know what the fictional...
Frozen? Hello?
Yeah, I don't know what the fictional land they lived in was.
Arendelle.
Oh. So
Okay,
if you'd have
anyway.
said she was foreign, I would have been like, oh, was she from Arendelle? But I didn't know what
So sorry.
the city was, so I couldn't make the joke.
Oh, man.
Run it back.
So she was nice, and she was, she'd work hard and that kind of thing, but then also, and then there was one guy, he was a delivery guy, and he was nice and also grumpy. Like, he was grumpy because he was a delivery guy in South Florida. Like, I think that just comes with the territory. It's hot and it's gross and
Nice pea.
right. And then he was but then he was also like never mean to me for any reason. So it was just like a 5-person operation, including me. But there were some things that were just kind of like sketchy. Like a health inspector came in and I didn't have like proper paperwork or something. So they told me to just like hide in the back, which was just weird at some point.
To be hired, you didn't have a proper paperwork?
I had proper paperwork to be hired, but not to be...
Oh, like
I didn't have like
touching
some
food or
certification that I needed to... I don't know. That was weird.
something? Hide in the back.
But most of it wasn't like... It was mostly to go. Like nothing was really like in-house service. Like there was some people that would sit and eat. It was a very small dining room, but it was primarily like to go. And so like Nick would make the pizzas. I couldn't even tell you what I did really. Like, I don't think that they trusted us enough to do anything. But we would be able to top pizza by the slice because that was separate. Like, it was pre-made and then, like, sliced. And then you would put your toppings on and put it in, like, a little extra cheese and put it back in the oven. So I was able to do that and then slice pizzas as they came out of the oven and then get sodas. That was pretty much it. So it wasn't, like, too much to do, but they also didn't give me a lot to do. And so I remember, like, just feeling the environment itself was just not, like, great. It was kind of toxic. And so just feeling like...
know that you're toxic.
I just want everyone to know that he didn't know that song until a week ago.
I definitely knew that song a long time ago.
So...
What did we do a week ago that would have...
We were talking about Britney Spears. That's a whole thing. We don't have time for that. So...
Hashtag free Britney.
Oh, Lord have mercy. So
this
when I
podcast
was-
from here on out will be a free Britney podcast where we'll be discussing
not.
Britney Spears and her
conservatorship. We will not be doing that. So when it was time for me to leave that job, because I was like just burnt out on it, and then Calvary wasn't giving me more hours, but I was like, I can't do this anymore. I literally went to give them my 2 weeks. I was like, hey, just want to let you know, like, I'm here to put in my 2 weeks notice. Like it was that shift, the end of that
Why
shift.
wait?
Literally, he was like, well, today can be your last day. And I was like, okay, bye. Like he just was really ready to get rid of me. And I still don't know why. It's not like I don't know. I didn't like drop pizza or I wasn't like incompetent. I showed up on time for all my shifts. Like I just...
It might have just been like they weren't like making enough money to justify hiring you, but they didn't have like a good reason to fire you. It probably was like we're not going to fire this girl, but we also like don't need her per se. So if she wants to quit, that's fine, but we're not going to fire. It could have been something like that.
Who knows?
All that to say, all the terrible bosses to say that Jack Chu.
Let me tell you.
Jack Chu.
What a guy.
And Judy Boudreau.
Yes.
Judy Boudreau and Jack Chu were
best bosses of my
life.
Probably.
I haven't had many bosses, but they were two of the greatest bosses I've ever had. Mm-hmm. They were super kind, super helpful, just super wonderful people. Like I really loved working for both.
They went above and beyond in mentorship, not just like this is your job. Like they did job and they did training and they did practical, but then they also did like above and beyond of like I care about your well-being.
Like Jack Chu did a lot of. He essentially did our premarital counseling.
Yeah.
And then he officiated our wedding.
Yep.
Like that's like the level of intimacy we had with our boss.
Yeah.
And like he was great, and Judy, she was super wonderful in the theater. Like she was someone who like kind of she trusted us. Like she would say like, hey, I need this project done, get it done. And then she was hands off for the most part. It was like
it's a good boss right there.
Yeah, like she was great, he was great. They were wonderful people. Even though I don't necessarily agree with all of the Calvary cogs and machines that were, and some of the stuff that happened was kind of like sketchy in my opinion for a church to be doing.
Different podcast.
That aside,
different time.
That aside, they were wonderful.
Yeah,
I loved working for them and working for a boss like them.
And then we moved up here because of Ethan's job. So he got a job as...
Are we gonna keep going? Because
we just have like a little bit.
we're at 35 minutes.
Oh, man.
I know.
So he got a job as an air traffic controller, which is
Like
why we moved up here.
4 jobs.
Right, exactly. First, all of the jobs I've had until this point. How about that? But we moved up here. I started working at a coffee shop. I didn't drink coffee at the time. Then I started drinking coffee because reasons. I worked at Caribou Coffee. Fun environment. Good coworkers. Fast pace. Things that I didn't agree with were rude AF customers and no bathroom breaks. So I was like, I'm out. So I worked there for like 9 months, and then I went to Target. The reasons I left Target were terrible management. Great job. Loved that job. Mechanically loved that job. My coworkers were great. I didn't get to spend a lot of time with them. I wish I got more. Corporately, I didn't feel like there was too many issues with Target necessarily. It's just management was like, do my job and I'll get paid for it. And I was like, we are not doing that. Goodbye. Left that and then went to work at Josiah's here in town, which was great initially. And like coffee shop, that is like the coffee shop atmosphere that, you know, that you wish for. I still wish that it was more coffee shop and less restaurant. It's kind of split 50-50, and restaurant is not something that I really wanted to be into, but I loved making coffee. I loved the regulars. All my coworkers, for the most part, save for one, basically, were excellent. Great experience. I was getting ready to leave Josiah's because there ended up being a toxic relationship between manager and or owner, I should say, and coworker that was just bleeding into everything and making everyone's lives miserable. And I was like, this is it. This is the thing I cannot live with. I must go. But I had a friend who knew more than I did who said, wait for your 2 weeks. And I said, okay. And it turns out that the owner sold. And I said, that solves all my problems because he's gone and this nasty coworker is gone. And my life is great. And so...
Take that, nasty coworker.
You know who you are. You're not listening to this. I don't care.
Jeez, this is personal.
You hate Macy's.
I hate Macy's. I want to be very clear because I think I'm still friends with some of my coworkers.
What?
Yeah, on Facebook.
What?
Yeah. I really, really liked most of my coworkers. I don't think there were any coworkers that I actively disliked or actively was like, I don't want to work with this person.
Oh, let me be clear. I liked every single one of my coworkers at Josiah's, save for this one person.
Okay.
And anyone who worked at Josiah's,
we don't need to be bad. This is not what this
while
podcast
I was
is
there, will know who I'm talking about.
The only reason we're going to bash people is if it's Macy's.
So, all of that to say, Josiah's changed hands, and I was like, this is great. And the new owners were lovely people. I worked with them for about 3 months until just shortly before the world shut down, which is just kind of crazy. The original owner got the heck out, had a really good time. And then the world shut down, and I was quitting in that time for other reasons, and so I just never went back. And now I have 2 also awesome jobs in ministry, again, that I love. So that's that. That's on first jobs and second and third and fourth jobs, and more jobs after
Keeping
that.
it going forever.
Yeah, we should revisit that Calvary. We should have a whole Calvary jobs podcast because that was man. Some
there's
of retrospectively
a lot of Calvary podcasts.
Retrospectively, probably best job. At the time, I don't think I felt that way, but retrospectively, I'm like, man, those were
loved it at the time.
Really, really good jobs.
Yeah,
both of them. So, okay, well that's it.
Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
Think about your first job. Was it good? Was it terrible? Think about the job you have now. If it's something you can't live with, leave.
If it was Macy's, I understand that it sucks. And if you think it's great, are you a psychopath?
This comes back to if Monopoly is your favorite game, Ethan's not your friend anymore.
If your favorite game is Monopoly and your favorite store is Macy's,
please never speak to Ethan again.
Meep.
If you know, you know.
Okay.
All right, bye.